In a remote corner of Maine, where the pines stand tall and shadows stretch long, lies Blackwood House, a once majestic estate now shrouded in neglect. Built in the 1870s by the wealthy Blackwood family, the house became notorious after a series of mysterious tragedies that drove its last occupants away, leaving it abandoned for decades. The story begins with Margaret Blackwood, the family matriarch, who was known for her unwavering dedication to her children. But tragedy struck when her youngest son, Thomas, vanished on a stormy night. Desperate to find him, Margaret searched the sprawling grounds, her calls for him echoing through the trees. Days turned to weeks, and just as hope began to fade, Thomas's body was discovered at the edge of the lake, a victim of an unfortunate accident, or so the townsfolk believed. Grief-stricken, Margaret descended into madness. She began hosting extravagant parties, believing that Thomas's spirit would return to her among the revelers. Guests reported seeing a pale boy in the corner of their vision, always just out of reach, as if he were caught between worlds. The parties continued until a fire broke out one fateful evening, engulfing the east wing and claiming Margaret's life. With her death, the house fell silent, its walls echoing only the whispers of the past. Decades later, a group of college students, drawn by tales of the supernatural, decided to explore Blackwood House for their documentary project. Armed with cameras and a mix of excitement and trepidation, they entered the creaking front door. Dust motes danced in the dim light as they made their way through the opulent yet decaying rooms. As night descended, they set up camp in the grand parlor. With the cameras rolling, they recounted the tragic history of the Blackwood family. Laughter echoed in the air, but as the clock struck midnight, the atmosphere shifted. A cold breeze swept through the room, extinguishing their lanterns and plunging them into darkness. Suddenly, a soft, haunting melody began to play, a lullaby that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The students exchanged nervous glances, their bravado quickly fading. One of them, Sarah, felt an inexplicable pull toward the staircase. As she ascended the creaking steps, the melody grew louder, guiding her to the attic door, slightly ajar. With a deep breath, Sarah pushed the door open, revealing a room filled with cobwebs and forgotten toys. In the corner, a dusty music box sat, its lid slightly open. She reached out to touch it, and as her fingers brushed the surface, the lullaby stopped abruptly. The room grew eerily quiet, and a chill settled in the air. Suddenly, a voice, soft yet clear, filled the attic. "Help me find him." The students froze, the weight of the words pressing down on them. They turned to see a translucent figure of a young boy standing near the window, his eyes wide with longing. In a moment of clarity, Sarah realized Thomas was not at peace. Driven by compassion, she spoke gently. "We'll help you find him." The figure nodded, and with that, the air began to shift, a whirlwind of emotions swirling around them. The students felt a pull as if they were being led. They raced back down the stairs, following the boy through the darkened halls, until they reached the lake outside. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and they saw an outline of a child reflected on its surface. Together, the boy whispered, and they joined hands, closing their eyes in unison. A warmth enveloped them, and when they opened their eyes, the lake was calm, the air still. The boy had vanished, but they felt a profound sense of relief, as if a weight had been lifted. As dawn broke, they left Blackwood House behind, forever changed by the experience. And though the house still stood, a hollow shell of its former glory, the echoes of Margaret and Thomas Blackwood were no longer trapped within its walls. Instead, the whispers of a lost mother and her son mingled with the rustling leaves, a bittersweet reminder of love and loss, finally at peace. As the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, the students stood by the lake, still processing what had just occurred. The air felt lighter, as if the burden of the past had finally been lifted. But even in their moment of relief, a lingering tension hung in the atmosphere, and the haunting melody of the lullaby echoed faintly in their minds. Sarah, still shaken, turned to her friends. "We have to document this. There's so much more to the story than we realized." Her enthusiasm was met with mixed reactions. Some were eager to delve deeper, while others felt an uneasy chill crawl down their spines. After a brief discussion, they decided to return to the house one last time to gather their equipment and gather more clues about the Blackwood family. As they stepped back into the decaying grandeur of Blackwood House, a sense of foreboding washed over them. The walls seemed to whisper secrets, and every creak of the floorboards echoed with the weight of untold stories. They began their search in the library, a room lined with dusty tomes and cobweb-covered shelves. Sarah rifled through the books, hoping to uncover something. Letters, journals, anything that could shed light on Margaret's and Thomas's lives. Meanwhile, the others explored the remnants of the parlor, their voices muted by the thick air of history that clung to the room. Suddenly, one of the students, Alex, called out, "I found something." He held up a fragile envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with a faded wax stamp. As they gathered around, they could see it was addressed to Margaret Blackwood. Carefully, Sarah pried it open, her heart racing. Inside was a letter, written in a hurried scrawl. It spoke of dark omens and whispered warnings from the woods. "The spirits of the lake are restless," it read. "They seek to reclaim what was lost. Do not let your son wander too close." Sarah's pulse quickened. The letter was dated just days before Thomas's disappearance. What if she didn't ignore the warnings? She pondered aloud. What if something more sinister was at play? The atmosphere in the room thickened, and they exchanged uneasy glances. Just then, a loud crash resonated from the upstairs hallway. The group jumped, adrenaline coursing through them. "What was that?" one of the students whispered. Cautiously, they made their way toward the source of the noise, hearts pounding in their chests. As they climbed the staircase, a strange energy pulsed through the air. Shadows flickered along the walls, and the temperature dropped. When they reached the landing, they found the door to the attic swinging open, an invitation or a warning. The group hesitated, exchanging nervous looks. "Maybe we should leave," one suggested. But Sarah felt an unshakable pull toward the attic, as if it held the answers they sought. Gathering their courage, they stepped inside. The room was now filled with a thick fog that seemed to swirl around them, obscuring their vision. The music box lay open on the floor, and as they approached, it began to play again, softly at first, then building to a haunting crescendo. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and they could see their breath clouding in front of them. In the center of the room, a shadowy figure began to materialize. The students froze, dread washing over them. It was a woman, her face obscured by darkness, but the outline was unmistakably that of Margaret Blackwood. "Help me," she whispered, her voice laced with desperation. The air crackled with tension as she raised her hand, pointing toward a hidden trapdoor in the corner of the attic. "What do you want?" Sarah managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Find him, bring him back." Margaret's voice faded into the echoes of the room, leaving the students in a stunned silence. Driven by an inexplicable urge, Sarah knelt beside the trapdoor, her heart racing. With trembling hands, she pulled it open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase descending into the depths of the house. "Are we really doing this?" someone whispered, uncertainty lacing their tone. "Whatever happened to Thomas?" "It's down there," Sarah replied, her resolve strengthening. "We can't turn back now." One by one, they descended into the darkness, the air growing heavier with each step. The faint glow of their flashlights barely pierced the gloom, and an oppressive silence enveloped them, broken only by the sound of their footsteps. At the bottom, they found themselves in a small, damp cellar. The walls were lined with old crates and forgotten relics, and the musty smell of decay hung in the air. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface clouded with grime. "What is this place?" one student murmured, moving closer to the mirror. As they gathered around, the air crackled with energy, and their reflections began to warp and twist. In the mirror, they saw not only themselves but the faint outlines of figures from the past, Margaret, Thomas, and shadows of those who had come before them. Suddenly, a voice erupted from the mirror, booming and echoing through the cellar. You have awakened what was sleeping. You cannot change what has been done. Panic surged through the group, but Sarah stood firm, recalling the plea from the spirit of Margaret. We're here to help. We want to set things right, she shouted into the mirror, her voice resolute. As if answering her call, the shadows in the mirror began to coalesce into a more defined shape. Thomas, reaching out to them, eyes filled with longing. Help me find peace. Help me return. The room trembled, the walls vibrating with energy. It was now or never. Would they be able to unravel the tragic history of Blackwood House? Or would they become part of its haunting legacy? Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. The air crackled with tension as Thomas's spectral form grew clearer, his features etched with a mix of innocence and sorrow. Sarah felt an overwhelming urge to reach out to him, but she hesitated, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The mirror pulsed with energy, reflecting not just their faces but the pain of lost souls. Please, Thomas's voice echoed through the cellar, a desperate plea that sent chills down their spines. I can't move on. I'm trapped here because of what happened that night. We're here to help you, Sarah said, stepping closer. Tell us what we need to do. As she spoke, the mirror shimmered and rippled, revealing fragments of the past. They saw Margaret frantically searching for Thomas, her calls echoing in the woods, and then a vision of the boy near the lake, his laughter mingling with the wind. But just as quickly, the images turned dark. The boy slipping beneath the water, the chaos of the storm, and finally Margaret, alone in her madness. Find the truth, Thomas urged, his voice growing faint. You must understand what really happened. The students exchanged glances, the gravity of their task sinking in. We need to look for clues, something that connects the events of that night, Sarah said, her determination hardening. In a sudden burst of courage, Alex pointed to the wall. What about those crates? They look like they haven't been touched in years. The group turned their attention to the old, dust-covered crates lining the cellar walls. They moved toward them, the anticipation palpable. As they pried open the first crate, a cloud of dust erupted into the air, making them cough. Inside, they discovered old toys, dolls, marbles, and a small, rusted tin box. Alex lifted it out and carefully opened the lid. Inside was a collection of faded photographs. Images of Thomas, laughing and playing, interspersed with pictures of the lake. But one caught Sarah's eye. It was a photograph of Margaret standing by the water's edge, a look of dread etched on her face. In the background, obscured by the trees, was a shadowy figure, an outline that seemed to loom over the scene. The others leaned in, their hearts racing. Who is that? One of them whispered, pointing. It looks ominous. I don't know, Sarah replied, a sense of unease creeping into her voice. But it could be a part of the mystery. If Margaret was worried about something, maybe it wasn't just the storm. As they examined the other photographs, they noticed something odd about the timeline. There were images of the lake before Thomas's disappearance, showing gatherings of the Blackwood family and their friends. But in every picture, the shadowy figure lingered in the background, growing more distinct with each passing moment. We need to figure out who this figure is, Sarah said, determination solidifying in her voice. What if this is connected to why Thomas couldn't find peace? Just then, the mirror shimmered again, and the shadowy figure began to morph, its features becoming more defined. A flicker of recognition washed over Sarah. I think I've seen this figure before, she said, recalling a passage in one of the dusty books in the library. It was mentioned in the folklore, she continued, piecing it together. The spirit of a man who drowned long ago, someone who was said to lure children to the water. Fear rippled through the group as they realized the implications. Could it be that Thomas was drawn to the lake by this spirit? What if he wasn't alone that night? Alex's voice trembled with urgency. We have to find more information, Sarah urged, a plan forming in her mind. We need to go back to the library and look for anything that could shed light on this man and his connection to the Blackwoods. The group agreed, hearts pounding with a mix of fear and excitement. They retraced their steps back upstairs, the weight of the cellar's secrets heavy on their shoulders. As they made their way to the library, the atmosphere felt charged, almost alive. Once inside, they frantically searched the dusty shelves, flipping through pages of old books and newspapers. The dim light cast long shadows, making every creak of the floorboards sound ominous. Finally, Sarah found an old newspaper clipping tucked away in a forgotten volume. "Here!" she exclaimed, holding it up for everyone to see. The article was dated decades ago, detailing the mysterious drowning of a local boy named Samuel Grayson. According to the report, Samuel had been seen playing near the lake shortly before his disappearance, and witnesses claimed to have seen a man lurking in the shadows that night. "Could this be the same figure?" one of the students asked, their voice laced with disbelief. "The timeline matches," Sarah said, her mind racing. "Samuel went missing years before Thomas. But if his spirit is still bound to this place, he could have influenced Thomas's fate." As they pieced together the chilling narrative, the air thickened with unease. The connection was undeniable. Margaret had been aware of the dark legend, trying to protect her son from a fate similar to Samuel's. With newfound determination, they resolved to confront the spirit of Samuel Grayson. "If we can help Thomas find peace, maybe we can also free Samuel," Sarah suggested, her voice steady. "Let's go back to the lake," Alex said, his eyes reflecting both fear and courage. "It's time to end this once and for all." As they made their way back outside, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting an eerie glow over the lake. The water shimmered like glass, but beneath its surface, they could feel the weight of history pressing down on them. The group gathered at the water's edge, hearts pounding. "How do we summon him?" one of the students asked. "We speak the truth," Sarah replied, standing tall. "We acknowledge what happened and invite him to show himself." Taking a deep breath, Sarah called out, her voice strong and clear. "Samuel Grayson, we seek your spirit. We know what happened, and we want to help you find peace." For a moment, there was only silence. The wind rustled through the trees, and the water remained still. Then, slowly, a mist began to rise from the lake, coalescing into a figure. The same shadowy outline they had seen in the photographs. "Why have you come?" the figure asked, its voice echoing like a distant thunderclap. "We've come to understand," Sarah said, her voice unwavering. "To help Thomas and to free you from your torment. You don't have to be trapped anymore." The spirit flickered, uncertainty clouding its features. "I was betrayed by the darkness, drawn to the water, lost in my own sorrow. I cannot let him suffer as I did." With a glance at Thomas, who stood beside her, Sarah felt the connection deepen. "You can find peace together. Help us, and we can end the cycle of pain." As the moon rose high in the sky, the lake shimmered with an otherworldly light. The spirits of Thomas and Samuel began to intertwine, their forms merging, as if drawn together by an invisible force. "Together?" Thomas echoed, reaching out toward Samuel. But just as they began to come together, a sudden roar of wind swept across the lake, and the atmosphere shifted, darkening as shadows emerged from the depths. "No!" Sarah shouted, her heart racing. "This can't be how it ends." The shadowy figure began to grow larger, more menacing. It was the embodiment of the darkness that had haunted the Blackwood family, determined to keep the boys trapped in its grip. With desperation fueling her courage, Sarah stepped forward, shouting over the howling wind. "We know you're there. We're not afraid of you. Your time is over." As her words cut through the chaos, the dark figure hesitated, flickering between forms. In that moment of weakness, Thomas and Samuel reached out toward each other, the light of their spirits shining brighter than the darkness surrounding them. "Help us!" they called in unison, their voices a harmonious plea that echoed across the lake. With a final surge of determination, Sarah and her friends joined hands, creating a circle of strength. "We won't let you be trapped any longer," they shouted together, their voices rising above the cacophony. As their collective will surged forth, the darkness began to dissolve, retreating into the depths of the lake. The spirits of Thomas and Samuel intertwined, their light growing brighter, pushing back against the shadows. In a blinding flash, the dark figure dissipated, and a profound silence fell over the lake. The water settled, reflecting the moonlight like a polished mirror. For a moment, everything was still. Then, as the mist began to clear, they saw two figures standing at the water's edge, Thomas and Samuel, their faces serene and free of sorrow. "Thank you," Thomas whispered, his voice gentle as the breeze. "You've set us free." With that, they stepped back, their forms becoming ethereal, merging with the light of the moon. As the last remnants of their spirits faded into the night, the students stood together, breathless and awed. The weight of the house, the lake, and the tragic history began to lift, leaving behind a sense of peace. But as they turned to leave, Sarah felt a lingering presence behind her. A warmth, a quiet assurance. They had not only freed two lost souls, but had also uncovered a truth that had haunted Blackwood House for far too long. Yet, as they made their way back, a chill swept. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. As they made their way back from the lake, a chill swept through the air, and Sarah paused, sensing something was still amiss. The peacefulness felt too fragile, and a flicker of darkness lingered just beyond their sight. Suddenly, a whisper echoed in the wind, a warning that sent shivers down her spine. The darkness may be vanquished, but the house still holds its secrets. Determined to confront whatever remained, Sarah led her friends back to Blackwood House. Inside, the air felt charged, as if the house itself was waiting for them to uncover the final truths. In the library, they discovered an old journal tucked away in a hidden compartment of a desk. It belonged to Margaret Blackwood, filled with her thoughts and fears. As they read, it became clear that she had been aware of the dark spirit long before Thomas's disappearance. "Protect him," one entry read. "The lake is not just water. It is a gateway." Understanding dawned on Sarah. The house was a nexus of lost souls and unresolved pain. The darkness they had faced was a manifestation of the grief and fear that had accumulated over generations. Realizing they had to confront the legacy of the Blackwood family, they held a small ceremony in the parlor, lighting candles and reading passages from Margaret's journal. They spoke words of forgiveness and release, honoring the spirits that had lingered too long. As they did, the house trembled gently, and a soft glow enveloped the room. The oppressive atmosphere began to lift, and the whispers faded into silence. When they finally stepped outside, the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a golden light on the now peaceful Blackwood House. The weight of history felt lighter, and the lingering darkness had been banished. The students stood together, a sense of camaraderie and achievement bonding them. They had faced the echoes of the past and emerged victorious. As they left the grounds, they looked back at the manor, no longer a haunted shell but a place of healing. And while the stories of the Blackwood family would live on in the whispers of the trees, Sarah knew that the spirits had finally found their peace, free to roam in the light. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.